Hi everyone, and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. Today I'm really happy to be joined by Hannah Parry, who is a writer of adults and young adults books. So welcome to the show, Hannah.
Hi Teddy, thank you very much for having me.
No, great. No, thank you very much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here. So why don't you tell us a bit about your background and how you got into writing?
Sure. I came to it quite late. I trained as a nurse originally. It's not entirely left field. Both my parents were writers. They were copywriters in advertising in the 1970s. So they were, that Mad Men. I don't know if you've seen that TV show,
Yeah.
Generation. And my sister, but we all read a lot. There's a lot of reading going on, kind of in an escapist way, to be honest. And in my 20s, I travelled a lot, and I would find myself sitting, writing in the back of filofaxes. In those days, we had filofaxes with things, like note pages that you could write in. And I'd go and sit with a bottle of wine and write things down. And I think what I didn't realise what I was doing was I was trying to write down to find out how I felt about things. I wasn't writing stories or anything. And then suddenly in my late 20s, I wrote something for somebody's wedding book. Someone was making an album. And someone said to me, God, that was really good. You should think about doing this properly. And I'd never thought about it until then. It was so nice of her to say that. And then a lot of things happened very quickly. My mother died when I was 30. I had my daughter. My father got ill, and then he died. So these things that happen to you in life happened very quickly, but quite traumatically. And I found myself writing more and more. I think it's quite a common thing with writers. You often find that, yes, they might have written short stories and they enjoyed all that when they were younger, but it takes something to kind of push them over the edge, as it were. And I found myself, I read a book and I thought it was rubbish, and I sat down and my brain said, well, why don't you have a go? So I sat down and started trying to write a book, and it was absolutely terrible. But that's where I started. So I was about 37 by that time. Yeah, about 37, so kind of late.
Right, okay, yeah. That story you just said quite resonated with me. I was just listening to a podcast with Jimmy Carr on the other day, the comedian, and he said if you ever meet a comedian, ask them which one of their parents was ill, because it's usually some past issue that's caused them to, use humour as a device for getting past it. And I think it's quite similar with writers. Often they've got this urge to write for a particular reason, and they want to get something down on paper.
Yes, exactly. And to, that question, why do you write? I think, first of all, to find out what I think. And then secondly, the escapism of it allows you to go into a different world. I write historical children's fiction. I mean, couldn't be more different to my day-to-day life. But I can go into that world and I don't have to think about anything that's happening here. That was it originally. It's not so much about that now, but that was the original thing. That's really interesting about Jimmy Carr. I'll go and look that up.
Oh yeah, he's unbelievable. If he's a really interesting podcast guest. He's been on a couple of podcasts now. One of them was with Chris Williamson, and he was on Diary of a CEO, which are like the two of the big entrepreneurial type.
Oh yes, I know that one.
Yeah, very interesting guy, and his book's really good as well, Before and Laughter. So I'd really recommend that book actually for people who are interested in learning about not just comedy, but about being more effective. I think it's a really good book. So your two books.
Yeah.
Let's start with your young adults books, the Isabella Rockwell series. So there's two books in the series at the moment, I think. Tell us a bit about why you started writing those books, because as you mentioned, there's historical elements to them.
Yeah, I don't know why I started writing those books. In retrospect, I wish I'd had a bit more of an eye on the market, you know what I mean? But
oh, really?
The idea was, well, yeah, children's historical fiction is a tough sell. It's,
I would have read it.
Publishers think, yeah, that's very sweet of you. It was a very big editor said to me one day, I was trying to submit it. She said, I love this book. She said, I'd buy this book. But she said, my boss won't touch it with a barge pole. So I thought, it was at that point I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and self-publish it. I'll publish it myself. Just in terms of numbers, I think, it's just harder to they don't imagine people are going to buy that as much as they're going to buy fantasy or adventure. Well, it is adventure fiction. But anyway, I started because the idea I had was about, I had a character who was, I was reading a lot of literature. I read a lot of older, like A Little Princess and those kind of colonial writers. There's a writer called MMK who writes very knowledgeably about India in the 1800s, around the time of the Indian Revolution, when the Great Britain had India in control, and how the Indian people rose up against them. So she writes brilliantly about, and I read all her books. I also came to this country when I was 7, and I did not like it one bit. And I had a character, so who was a girl who was brought up. These English kids were brought up entirely in India, thinking themselves pretty much Indian. Okay, yeah, they knew they were English, but they'd never been to England. All their friends, people they interacted with were Indian. You know, their parents might be somewhere, but in the armies and stuff, or in the civil service. So it was about a girl who that had happened to. She's brought up entirely in India, and she ends up in London in winter, and she's got no money, and it develops from there. So it was a combination of having that character and reflecting on, I don't know, it was just what came out, actually. It was just reflecting on the fact how, and I suppose also about the British taking a lot from countries that weren't theirs, actually, and how kind the Indian people were to the British. You know, they didn't have to be, but they were. And it was all those kind of things all coming together, I think.
Yeah. Did you grow up in India then?
No. I grew up in the States. Sorry, I should have said, yeah.
Oh,
I was
right.
in the States until I was 7, but no. I mean, it's hard. No, not at all. But it's just when you get somewhere and you're a kid and the accent is different. The food was different. I didn't like the milk. I didn't like the grandmother that I had here. I didn't like the weather. You know, it was all, I remember it was so clear. Yeah, it was all a bit of a shock to the system. I need to really sort of grow up a bit about it, to be honest. But my dad's English, so but my mother was Canadian, so it was it was just a bit of a culture shock, really. So I could
Yeah,
draw
of
on
course.
that for that book, but it wasn't about me. It was just an adventure story.
Yeah.
And I like
What
history,
was
so it wasn't.
Yes, history.
Go
That's
ahead.
my. As I say, history is like that's sort of the books I like reading to as well when I'm not on duty. What's when you were writing those books, the Rockwell books, the Isabella Rockwell books. What was your process for getting the books written? Did you have a particular structure that you followed? And also, did you have a story in mind before you started writing?
Yes, I had the first book, and I did have a story in mind because my dad had died. So the book is basically, it is her searching for her dad's missing in the first book. And in the second book, it's more detailed about her search for him. Because my formal education was sort of, I was really naughty and I stopped going to school when I was about 14. And so I wanted to learn how to write properly. I was very aware there were big gaps in my education. And so I went back and I did a master's in creative writing, and I used the first book as my dissertation. So I had a kind of deadline for it. But I used the structure of The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, which is Vogler,
Mm-hmm.
which is a kind of slightly simplified version of the Joseph Campbell archetypes books. Joseph Campbell is so he does a sort of story structure too, but it's much more detailed. So I used that book and I followed that, and that was a revelation to me that you could follow a structure, and if you read a lot, you've kind of got a neural network that of the shape of the story. So I got most of it right in the shape of the story I was trying to write. I got most of it. I was missing a few sort of points of tension in that middle bit, but I got, so that was really helpful. And then the second book, which I wrote, was just really a continuation of the first book, except the first book is in London in the UK, and the second book takes place in India, the north of India. which was really difficult because you've no idea how many words I needed to look up to describe the word hot. Okay, so I did a word search. I think I had hot in it about sort of 250 times. So, and also India is a really big place, and
Yeah.
I only had trains to get everybody from, or didn't even have trains actually. I had horses and
Right.
carts to get people from A to B. So that was, as a you'll know, as a historian, those things are a really big problem when you're trying to write an adventure story and keep it going, and you're like, oh my god, it's 250 miles to the
Yeah.
next
That's like
destination.
it's like that mistake they made in Game of Thrones when the books kind of described everything quite nicely, but when you watched it on TV, they were doing these 500-mile journeys and like the next day,
Did you pick that up then?
a little bit, yes.
Did you? Did you? I need to go back and watch it more closely. I read the books first because I saw the TV show looked really good, and I thought, oh, this looks really good. I'm going to have to go. I think I better read the books first, otherwise I won't ever read them. So I read them first, and then watched the show. I didn't. I must. I'll go back and have a look.
Yeah,
My
I mean the
daughter's
books are amazing, but I thought the show was really good until like the end, and I thought it was really petered off and lost its way a bit. But I thought the books are incredible. I can't wait for the next ones to come out. I feel like
what is happening with? I can never find what is happening. Is there going to be another one?
there's another couple. It's one of those sort of industry rumors about what's going on. I don't think anyone. I think he's just being quite slow. So yeah,
I wondered if he'd written himself into a corner. Like,
possibly.
so they're so brilliant, those books, but I could see how. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't imagine how he's. But I'm there for it. I'm there for whatever he produces. I'll be there.
Have you ever written yourself into a corner?
Yeah, a million times.
Yeah.
And had to, and it's always about three-quarters of the way through the manuscript. And people say, they say if there's something wrong in Act 3, it's because there's something wrong in Act 1. And it's so true. And to have to go back and unpick the thing that's in Act 1, rejig everything, so I can get to the 75% and everything sort of falls into, then it will hopefully falls into place. I've
Yeah.
never been technically blocked, but I have really sat there and thought, I really don't want to do this
Yeah.
because I'm lazy and I'm cross. I've written myself into a corner.
When you have written yourself into a corner, is it you that's noticed it, or have you been working with an editor along the way who's helped you out?
No, it'll be me that's noticed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you got any techniques that you've used to try and get yourself out of it, or is it just a case of rereading everything you've done and
it is just going to bed for 3 days and sulking. Doesn't get much done. There's the only way that I have ever managed to do it is to go back and change the thing that's causing the problem.
Yeah.
And then hope that I don't have to change it too much in the 50% of the manuscript between that bit and the bit that's giving me grief.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's been a lot. The book I just wrote, I think I wrote, it's coming up, it's about 80,000 words. And I think I've got another 80,000 words I've cut, maybe 60 of stuff I've written, taken out, and had to rewrite, taken out, put back in, but that might just be that particular book. The one before it wasn't quite so bad, but sometimes it's like that. But I don't think any of it's ever wasted.
Yeah.
I guess that's why it takes a long time to write a book.
Yeah.
I was with a really nice podcaster guy, and he'd just written a book, and he just said, why did it take me a year to write? And I was like, well, because of stuff like that, right? Have you written?
I have, written a few books under myself and also under pen names, mostly non-fiction, so it's a bit of a different prospect, I think. That's why I find it quite interesting speaking to fiction writers, because the books that I've written on non-fiction, it's been more of a case of getting your idea out, and there's usually a point to the book. So it might be a self-help book, it might be about a particular topic. So what I'd be doing is leading the reader towards that point. rather
Yes.
with there is still storytelling elements to it, but it's very much like here's a short story to demonstrate this point, on to the next point. Whereas with yours, it's much more like there's a narrative that needs to follow the whole way through, so it is slightly different. That's why I find it quite interesting talking about that
Yes.
writing technique with people, because it is, I think, a different approach in quite a big way.
Yes. Yes. It's nice to know you. Yes, I suppose you're like, I've got to get that point across, then I've got to do that point, then that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in fiction, you're probably supposed to be doing that, having a sort of solid point, but you've got points within the structure or beats that you've got to hit.
Yeah, that's interesting. What you talked about before with that the structure you followed, because it sounds almost a bit like, not being rude, but like painting by numbers, where you've got like this whole thing decorated out, and obviously there's much more to it than that, because obviously you've got to pick the colours, you've got to pick the story, all those sort of things. So with the structure that you followed, what can you tell us a bit what that structure looks like and how it applies to your books?
Yes, Christopher Vogler does a 3-act structure, which is if you started along. I wish I had if you started along a line, it basically the line goes gradually. You start with your inciting incident, so something happens to which the main character has to react, doesn't have, and then they've got to make a choice as to whether they accept the challenge, and then basically the tension goes up incrementally throughout acts 1 and 2, and then at the point between at the sort of halfway through act 3, there'll be a very high point, and then there'll be a massive dip.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty, if you apply this structure to any of the great stories, they'll always fit this structure. So that dip is the hero's darkest hour, they call it, which is where, from the point at which there seems to be no return. And then suddenly the hero, so then it goes up again because the hero does find a way out of the terrible thing, the final terrible thing. But each of these dips, so there's a point of tension and then there's a dip in the action, and it goes up a little bit. So the stakes are raised every single time there's a point of tension.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, but there will always be something like the midpoint crisis of any. If you watch a film, it's easier. I suppose it's easier to say with films because it's so easy to see it. I find it that where somebody, you think all is lost. It's not quite as bad as the hero's darkest hour, but you think all is lost. Often somebody will die, and it's a way of making the main character recommit to the second. So it's the middle of act 2, so to recommit to the final act and a half of the story. It does sound really formulaic, doesn't it? But it makes me feel better that I think books written before anybody came up with this structure all follow it anyway. So I think, well, I'm in good company.
I mean, it's basically Lord of the Rings, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Fits it perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I think it helps a lot to have that structure beforehand, because obviously it's not like you have this structure and you say, okay, at this page 100, I need to make a bit of tension. It's not like that formulaic. The story still flows from where you're writing it, but it just shows you the parts you need to hit in order to write a story that is generally quite compelling. Yeah. People use this in like everyday life, in their work, they use these different structures in their work and in everything. So there's no reason why you wouldn't want to use it for a book. And I think it makes it a much better story. When it came to marketing and publishing the book, you've self-published the children's books, and so they're obviously mostly for sale on Amazon, I'm guessing. Is it just Amazon that you use for distribution, or did you have other ways of getting it out?
Yeah, I've always used Amazon. Amazon have a thing called Amazon Select, Kindle Select.
Yeah.
Which is you can give the book away for 5 days.
Yeah. The ebook.
Every 90 days if you're enrolled in their Select program. But to be enrolled in that program, you have to not have it on any other platforms like Kobo, Nook, all that lot. So that's what I use, and I'm a hopeless self-promoter on social media. I mean, really, that's what I enjoy doing. Really bad. I'm trying hard, but anyway, I find it, if I take my 5 days, every 90 days, I take my 5 days and I pay for promotions on a lot of really good. There's a lot of newsletters and things that go out with free books, Digital Book Today, and a lot of these companies are American, and I get lots and lots of downloads from that, and then I hope that the bounce that those downloads gives me sells some books afterwards. It also gets me reviews and things
Yeah.
that are really valuable for when people actually decide they want to purchase a book.
Yeah, definitely. And have you noticed that once people, so I guess you put the first book in the series on the free download, and then
Yeah.
people hopefully buy the second one. Have you
Yeah.
noticed any of that?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely does help. And I know the aim, people sort of say it would be brilliant to have a trilogy, because then you can have your first book permanently free, I think, or something like that. I haven't quite investigated
Right,
that yet.
yeah.
But yes, I've noticed if
This is the ebook, not the paperback, obviously.
yeah, this ebook, absolutely. And so if Winter's Bite has gone really well, I'll often put Winter's Bite on for free, and I'll put Fever Quest, which is the second one, I'll put that on for 99¢. And if I've done my job right, when people finish Winter's Bite, they'll buy Fever Quest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your plan with the book? Have you got plans for to make it into a trilogy?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm going to India in November.
Oh wow.
I know, I've never been. I'm so excited. So, and I'm going all around Rajasthan. I have the idea for the third book fleshed out, and so I hope to write it, finish the first draft by next spring, and then crack on. It takes me slightly less time to write these books. I've got another adult book coming out just after Christmas. So when that's done and dusted, then I can crack on with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, really looking forward to it, actually.
What are you finding the difference between writing an adult's book and writing a children's book?
I think probably there's more freedom to write for the adults. There's more with the children's. Children's book feels like it has more responsibility. I feel like I've got to get it right. I've got to get it really right. I suppose maybe because it's a historical fact as well.
Yeah.
As well as the children's sensibilities about things. It's aimed at readers of probably advanced readers of 9+. So I'm very aware that there might be some sort of 11-year-olds in there reading it. And with the adult book, I just sort of, and I suppose because they're modern day books as well, I just cracked on, didn't think about anything like that. Whereas with the children's books, I'm just feel like I've got more of a responsibility.
Yeah, you can't got to avoid sex, but it's also, I guess, with a children's book, you want to include like more moral stories. Do you think?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, there doesn't need to be a moral point to an adult book, does it? It can just be, this is a story. Whereas I guess with kids' books, there needs to be like good and bad and.
Yes, it's much more. I suppose it's much more clear cut, isn't it? But also my protagonist is a teenager, so all the things that come with being an early teenager, I don't want to pretend that those things don't happen. You know what I mean? I want to, but it is, like you say, it's presenting it. Yes, I suppose I haven't really morally. Yeah, morally, it's a lot. It's easier with the kids. Yeah, you're right. It's clearer, good and bad. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really interesting. Do you work on both books at the same time, or are you just? I'm just working on this book. Yeah.
No, I wish I was that skilled. So I had an editor who I really like, and she said, "Well, why don't you edit the adult book in the afternoon and work on the Indian one in the morning?" And I was like, "No, I haven't got the brain space for that." Can you do that? Can you do two things at once, or I have to just do one thing and finish it and do something else?
No, I'm pretty one-track minded. When with the because obviously you self-publish all your books. You just mentioned your editor there. So who do you have helping you to do the book, and what was the process of working with an editor like?
Yeah, I've got she's a writer. She would call herself, I think, a writer's assistant.
Yeah.
But she's the most fantastic editor, and so she copy edits. So when I've done 8 million drafts, I'll send it to her and she will then go through it with a fine-tooth comb and send it back to me covered with red comments.
Always red, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so stressful. And then we we go through it, but she's also really good at the tech side of things, and she will make sure that the file is in the. I'll get the cover done. I use a cover artist who I really like, and I'll do all of that, and then I'll send it all to Nicola, and she will then upload it to where it needs to be uploaded, and also put it on my website too. So I can do those things, but it just takes me longer. She's young, she's all over it.
In terms of marketing, once you've got that editing and process done, you mentioned just before that you talked about some newsletters and things like that. So I'm guessing you use the free book promotion type newsletters. Have you ever considered doing more targeted newsletter swaps? So, for example, finding another author in the same niche as you, who's maybe got a bit more of a following, and trying to get your book promoted on their newsletter.
I have never thought of that. Tell me about that.
It's something a lot of people do because, especially with writers who are professionals, they are often just writing, one book at a time. And so they have a newsletter and they want to write content to share to their audience. A lot of writers use newsletters to build a connection with their audience, but also to talk about things they're up to, their writing process. People get quite interested in them. And a newsletter is the only real way that you can talk directly to your customers, I think, because if you're on social media, it is a bit like, okay, here's my stuff, let's everyone look at it. Whereas with a newsletter, people have signed up to follow you. So you've got quite a targeted audience there. And so if someone recommended your book, there's a good chance that they would pick it up. So say, for example, your book is like historical young adults kind of book. I mean, obviously, if you could get someone like Philip Pullman to promote your book to his newsletter, that would obviously be amazing. But there's much more. There's lots of newsletters with people who are still within grasp to a smaller writer who might promote your book. And the good thing about it is you're building up that network with other people. So ideally, you'd want to have your own newsletter that you can swap with them in future. So whilst you're writing your book, you might say, "Oh, hey, read this book by XYZ. I think it's really good. You'll really like it." So I think it'd be worth doing that because you must know that.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, if you think about the you must know some of the writers who are similar category to you.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I've got quite a few writer friends. Yeah. We've all been writing together for years. Yeah.
Great. I think it's a really good thing to do. Getting your newsletter uploaded. And one of the main things I've learned from doing this podcast is building your network is one of the best ways to promote your work as an author, because you've got people that are going to have your back. It's nice to have friends in the industry. And also that cross promotion of books, I think, especially if you're self-published, that is basically your own distribution network.
Yes, absolutely.
And the second thing, we'll leave the second thing. That was the main thing. Building that newsletter out is the most important thing. Newsletter. And I'll edit this bit out. So along with the network, it's building out your own newsletter, because that is a great way to speak directly to your customers, so that you can, speak directly to them. You can potentially even sell products in the future, get ideas for your next book. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the newsletter and the network. Yeah.
It's the newsletter. I have actually tried really hard to get sign-ups, and I've found I'm probably not going about it. I haven't researched it as much as I should have.
Yeah.
But I should really get on that, because you're absolutely right. It is a really good way. But I got friends who do it, and I know that if I just asked nicely, they would probably,
I think so,
do something like that for me.
Another good place to start would be StoryOrigin. It's a really good tool, and it's quite good value.
StoryOrigin.
Yeah, you can do newsletter swaps on there. And I actually interviewed the guy who founded it, Evan Gow. I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. So that's coming out soon. But that's a really good piece of software. It's one of the best in the industry.
Oh, fantastic.
For doing newsletter swaps.
That's really helpful.
That's right. I think I try to get these recommendations out as much as possible because the audience like them as well.
Yeah, exactly. But you never know these things until somebody tells you, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
God, that's really helpful. I'll go straight there after this.
Yes. No, well, brilliant. I mean, this has been a really good conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. So tell us a bit more about your next projects before we go.
What, the book that's coming out after Christmas, or? Yeah, that is that's women's commercial fiction. I've written women's commercial fiction. So the last one that came out last Christmas was women's commercial fiction, kind of dark psychological. That was a pretty dark book. This one, I think, having got all of my issues out of the way, finally I've managed to write something that is lighter. It's about a woman who has a cryptic pregnancy, which is one of those pregnancies you get when you don't know you're pregnant until very late on. And it's about what she decides to do with that baby. So it's a bit lighter. Yeah.
Wow. When we were in the hospital with having our baby, there was someone in there who was like 25 weeks or something, and they only just found out they're pregnant. I was astounded. I couldn't believe it.
I know.
But it does happen.
It's 1 in 400 pregnancies.
Right. Yeah.
Are cryptic. I just find that's
amazing.
Extraordinary. And of course, the minute you find out, you start listening, you hear people. I've got a friend whose niece was, one of my daughter's friends was, it was 8 months along she was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. If people want to get in touch with you, find your books, follow you around the internet, where's the best place for them to do that?
Go to my website, which is hannahparry.com.
Great. Easy.
Yeah, easy. Got all my links are on there. Oh, you can go. I'm on Linktree as well if you want. Linktree too.
Brilliant.
Anyway,
right. We'll add links to the show notes, all that stuff anyway. But
thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So just before we go, we've got one final question, and that is, what is one book you recommend everyone should read?
Yeah, my one book is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Sorry, I know it's going to be round the wrong way with a double T at the end. And it is, instructions on writing and life. And she's just a bit of a philosopher, but she's very good in those moments when you want to go to bed and think that actually you're never going to write another word because you're crap. So that's when I reach for this book. She's very, very, very kind and encouraging.
Brilliant. Well, great recommendation. We haven't had that one before, so I'm really happy to get a new recommendation in there. So thank you.
Great.
Well, it's been great chatting to you.
I really enjoyed it.
Good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your next books. Let me know when they go live. And yeah, we'll speak soon.
I will. Thanks, Teddy.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.